This film could have been a low-budget philosophical drama, but it was picked up by a big Hollywood studio and turned into a romantic fantasy comedy, which remains the main achievement of its creators. The history of the film Groundhog Day began in 1987, when the Illinois Film Commission decided to help Chicago residents break into Hollywood. They announced that they would consider all script applications sent to them, and will send the most interesting of them to the Dream Factory. One of those who was inspired by this ad was screenwriter Danny Rubin. He was a wide-ranging author, writing scripts for commercials for children's TV shows and theatrical productions. He didn't even dream of working in big cinema, and even more so, he had no idea how to write a script for a full-length film.
But it was a chance that Rubin couldn't miss. The script, written in 2 months, turned out to be a heartfelt and partly romantic tragicomedy. The screenwriter began sending out Groundhog Day to Hollywood agencies, and one day the agent who received the script told Rubin that his project might be of interest to one client. It was Harold Ramis, a famous comic actor and screenwriter of the films Ghostbusters, Caddyshack, National Lampoon's Vacation. Filmography itself, Ramis did not say that he would be interested in Groundhog Day, but his representative knew very well that a new chapter had just begun in the comedian's life. Ramis quit taking drugs, divorced his wife, remarried, and under the influence of his new passion, became interested in Buddhism. So the scenario about the rebirth of a cynic was exactly the idea Ramis was looking for, to reflect on the screen your own transformation. The only problem with Groundhog Day from Ramis's point of view was that the script was not dramatic enough for the drama, and not funny enough for a comedy. So the first thing the director did was rewrite the text, making it wittier. Ramis got rid of Phil's voiceover. In his script, the hero's thoughts and feelings did not require off-screen explanations. The time the hero spent in the loop was reduced to several decades, but Phil spends years behind the scenes, mastering a complex hobby, like playing the piano and carving ice sculptures. The original script had a detailed backstory. Why exactly did Phil end up in Groundhog Day? Ramis says the following: "It was assumed that Phil has a girlfriend who, angry with him, buys a book 101 Ways to Cast a Magic Spell. Then she casts some spell, burns something, and smashes Phil's wristwatch with a hammer." The director eventually abandoned the prologue because he considered him completely worthless. Danny and Harold both said they avoided exploring the dark side of Phil when he could do truly terrible things without consequences. Ramis and Rubin prepared the final version of the script together. In 1990, when aspiring screenwriter Danny Rubin moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles to build a career in Hollywood. By that time, he already had several ideas, and he even managed to sell his first script, which shortly before Groundhog Day, little-known thriller Hear No Evil was released. One day, reading the novel and Rice the Vampire Lestat, the scriptwriter thought about vampire immortality, and began to think about what an ordinary person would do if his life had no end. It would either start to irritate her, or give her the opportunity to change for the better. Rubin decided to use this idea for his new script, but quickly realized that producing a large-scale film about the past, present, and future would be too expensive, and will not interest potential producers. Then the screenwriter remembered his old short story about a man who is forced to constantly live the same day. He realized that the main ideas of both plots coincide. At the same time, the concept of the day, what is repeated, does not require a big budget. Then Danny Rubin wondered what day the main character would get stuck in. He wanted to choose a holiday that would be memorable, but at the same time not too banal, and turning over the calendar stopped on February 2nd, Groundhog Day. It was an ideal choice because it had no political or religious connotations and was little known even in the USA. By the way, it is a tradition to anticipate the timing of the arrival of spring by the behavior of animals. Originated in Europe and came to America with German settlers in the 18th century, and since the end of the 19th century, Groundhog Day has become an official holiday, which began to be celebrated in the Pennsylvania town of Punxsutawney. Every year, Phil the groundhog is woken up on Turkey Hill, and if he calmly comes out of the hole, then winter will end very soon, and if he sees his shadow and gets scared and returns to the burrow, then winter will drag on for a few more weeks. It took 8 weeks to write the first draft of the script. The first 7, Rubin thought out the plot and characters. For the 8th wrote the finished text, Rubin decided to name the main character Phil Connors in honor of Punxsutawney Phil, and made him a TV commentator. So he would have a reason to go to the Groundhog Day celebration. Working on character transformation, the scriptwriter was guided by the model Kubler-Ross, or the 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, compromise, depression, and acceptance. Rubin originally wanted to explain why Phil was stuck in a time loop, but in the end he decided that, without explanations, the situation seemed more realistic. However, in many ways the initial version of the script differed from the story we see in the film. The action began without any prehistory. Phil could immediately foresee all the actions of those around him, and this should have intrigued the audience, who would wonder how the hero knows all this. And in the finale, Rita rejected Phil's feelings and ended up in her own time loop. And in general, the script was focused on the philosophical understanding of the situation, and the comedic and romantic elements remained in the background. After finishing the manuscript, Danny Rubin showed it to his agent. The story amazed him, but he warned that it would be very difficult to find interested producers. The agent was right, but one day the script accidentally came into the hands of producer Trevor Albert. He liked the story so much that he immediately offered to take on the script to his friend Harold Ramis, known as the writer of National Lampoon's Animal House, Stripes, and Dr. Egan Spengler of Ghostbusters. However, he did not have any significant success in directing, and his last film, Club Paradise, was a flop. Ramis wanted to move away from making light-hearted comedies by making something original, and Albert felt that Groundhog Day was exactly what he needed. Ramis, however, did not share the producer's hobbies. The script didn't seem funny to him at all, and he agreed to join the project only on the condition that Rubin's work would be revised and rewritten. At the same time they became interested Groundhog Day, independent studio, IRS Pictures. The producers said they were ready to allocate $3 million for the production of the film, and assured Rubin that his original concept would not be compromised. At the same time, Harold Ramis planned to cooperate with Columbia Pictures, which could provide decent financing and the participation of famous actors. Danny Rubin was faced with the difficult choice, insisting on his vision and getting a film that would have been unlikely to reach a wider audience or allow more influential filmmakers to transform their vision, while simultaneously becoming part of the big project. Fortunately, the scriptwriter chose the second option. Together with Ramis, they started working on a new version, which sought to preserve the original concept while making Groundhog Day more understandable to viewers. Turning from a philosophical drama into a romantic comedy, Ramis liked the idea of starting the story from the middle, and he wanted to keep it. However, the producers decided that viewers would be interested in seeing Phil's reaction to the incomprehensible events. The studio also demanded to know why Phil ends up in the loop, but this time the creators managed to defend their vision. Danny Rubin submitted a second draft of the story in February '91, but he didn't fully satisfy the movie bosses. According to the contract, Rubin could write another draft. However, Columbia assigned to work out the script Harold Ramis. The director removed the voiceover and kept the action strictly within the confines of the Punxsutawney, and also added more jokes and changed the characters' personalities, making Phil a more grumpy and cynical person. It's funny that the sweet vermouth that Rita orders also appeared thanks to Ramis. This is his wife's favorite drink. The new version of Ramis' studio liked. And finally, the director started looking for actors. Harold Ramis and Bill Murray had a long-standing friendship and professional relationship, but at first the director did not consider Murray as a candidate, as Rubin intended Phil Connors to be close 30 years. And Bill is already over 40. Producers, however, quickly realized that other famous comedians were not age-appropriate, and convinced the creators to make the hero older. The studio offered the role to Tom Hanks, but he turned it down because he felt his good guy image would get in the way of showing the character's evolution. When writing the script, he believed that the role of Phil Connors would be better suited to a serious actor who could also do comedy. When we were considering Hanks and invited him to discuss the role, Tom arrived, but later refused this role. He later told the director that he was right to turn down the role. He said, "Everyone knows I'm a good guy, so if I acted like a nasty weatherman, people knowing me would expect me to transform into a good guy. Therefore the magic that we saw on the screen would not have happened. And in the case of Bill, you have no idea what will happen next." Then the choice fell on Michael Keaton, who also rejected the offer, but for a different reason. The actor simply did not understand the idea of Groundhog Day, and later admitted that he regretted his decision for a long time. Phil could also be played by Chevy Chase, Steve Martin, Robin Williams, John Travolta, and Kevin Kline, but Ramis considered them too pleasant and realized that it was much easier to offer the role to Murray. and he agreed. Rubin was against Bill's candidacy because he considered him not talented enough. However, Ramis said the actor has an amazing ability to be vile and still be liked by the audience. However, by that time Murray was going through difficult times due to his divorce from his first wife and was extremely irritable and hot-tempered, which made work difficult not only for the director but also to the whole team. Comedy actresses were initially considered for the role of Rita Hanson, but soon the creators realized that the heroine should be softer and more pleasant and not talkative and witty. For a while, singer Tori Amos was considered for the role, but in the end Andie MacDowell was cast, known for the films Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, and Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which the creators liked with her casual grace and role in the drama The Object of Beauty. Ned Ryerson, Phil's classmate, was played by Stephen Tobolowsky, who at the time of the audition seemed to the director to be as intrusive and obnoxious as his character. Tobolowsky created his character inspired by his own insurance agent, who after the film's release even thanked the actor for his authentic portrayal. Buster Green, the mayor of Punxsutawney, was played by Brian Doyle Murray, Bill Murray's older brother. He worked with Harold Ramis on numerous occasions and often played small roles in films starring Bill. Doyle Murray added Doyle to his last name so he wouldn't be confused with his famous brother. The role of Larry the cameraman went to Chris Elliott, who could be seen in a small role in The Abyss. James Cameron. TV actress Angela Payton appeared as the hotel owner as Mrs. Lancaster, and the waitress Doris was played by Robin Duke. The role of Phil's assistant Kenny was given to Willie Garson, and Phil's drinking buddy named Gus was played by Rick Ducommun. Nancy is played by Merida Jarrety, who played a cameo role in the film Sleeping with the Enemy. The role of Fred was given to Michael Shannon, for whom Groundhog Day was the first film in his career, and his bride Debbie was played by another debutante, Hynden Walsh.
The film also features a cameo by Harold Ramis, who plays a neurologist who advises Phil to see a psychiatrist. And the role of Punxsutawney Phil got a real groundhog, which got the nickname Scooter. Moreover, a whole family of rodents took part in the filming. Principal filming on Groundhog Day took place from March 16th to 10th June 92 year. The creators wanted to use a typical American town for filming, in which nothing would betray the modern era. Although the film takes place in Punxsutawney, the team decided it wasn't picturesque enough, and it turned out that he was too small to accommodate all the actors and the film crew. The Punxsutawney authorities were of course offended by the team, and in retaliation, they refused to provide a real Groundhog Phil. The creators looked at more than 60 cities, and eventually settled on the town of Woodstock in state Illinois. By the way, it is located just 80 kilometers from Bill Murray's hometown Wilmette. Scenes on the Turkey Hill were planned to be filmed on the territory of the nearest nature reserve, but later they decided to move the filming to the main square of Woodstock, and involve local residents as extras. Many locations existed in real life. However, the Tip Top Cafe was specially built for the film on the site of an abandoned diner, and the interiors of the room where Phil stayed filmed on set in an empty warehouse. The main problem with the whole production process of Groundhog Day was the terrible behavior of Bill Murray. There was immediate disagreement between him and Harold Ramis over the tone of the painting. Murray wanted to return to Rubin's darker concept, and Ramis was aiming to create a romantic comedy. Bill bored the director with endless morning calls, proposing further amendments. And one day Ramis couldn't take it anymore and sent him to Danny Rubin, who had to listen to all the actors' complaints and edit the script. Bill decided that Harold's behavior was dismissive, and was so offended by him that almost stopped communicating with him. The actor was often late for filming and left the set without finishing work. He threw tantrums, argued furiously with the director, and criticized the performance of other actors. Besides, he didn't answer calls and didn't call back. One of the crew members suggested that Murray hire an assistant to manage his affairs. Then the actor, despite the whole team, found a deaf-mute assistant, with whom no one exclusively, and with Bill himself, could communicate. Ramis ended up having to deal with his unbearable boyfriend throughout the entire filming process, and irritated Bill Murray often had to endure physical discomfort, which made him even more angry. For example, for filming scenes where Phil steps into a puddle, he had to wear a neoprene pad on his leg. 2 pairs of socks and wrap it all in film. But even this didn't help, and the costume designers had to dry his leg with a hairdryer to avoid hypothermia. By the way, despite the spring-summer period of filming, it was often quite chilly in Woodstock, and the actors even added schnapps to their cocoa to warm up. However, later it got so warm that had to use artificial snow made from fire foam and cotton wool. However, for the final scene where Phil looks out the window on February 3rd, finally managed to capture a real snowy landscape. After another argument, Ramis convinced the kids to throw snowballs at Murray harder. But at the same time, Bill himself asked Andy McDowell to give him a real slap. For the diner scene where Phil is gorging himself on cakes, Bill Murray suggested spitting food into a bucket. The actor decided to cope, but he quickly became ill from just a few cakes. Also, Murray didn't have a good relationship even with Marmot Scooter. In the scene where Phil is driving a car with a marmot in his arms, the animal bites Bill on the finger, biting through a thick glove. And during the filming of subsequent takes, the marmot bit him again in the same place. In the end, the actor had to undergo a course of vaccinations against rabies, which, judging by his behavior on the court, didn't really help. And in general, the fact of vaccinations did not contribute to a good mood. Moments before the bite, Bill Murray improvised the phrase,
"Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry."
because the marmot started to get worried and tried to escape by climbing over the steering wheel. By the way, during the filming process, Murray demonstrated his improvisational talent more than once. Ramis said that most often when he tried to explain how to play a particular scene, Murray interrupted and asked him, "Just tell me this time Phil is good or bad?" based only on this characterization of the character. The actor understood how exactly should play this or that scene. Stephen Tobolowsky once said that during filming, when a huge crowd of locals gathered on the street, Bill Murray stopped filming to feed the crowd of onlookers. "We were about to start filming the movie Groundhog Day, and on the very first day, there were about 500 people who came to see us." Bill looked at me and said,
"You know what these people need."
Bill took me to the local bakery and bought everything there was to buy. And after that, he fed these local residents. Lloyd's store, which can often be seen in the background of scenes between Phil Connors and Ned Ryerson. This store tried to sue the studio for several $1,000s for lost business, but failed, thanks to their lawsuit demanding much more money than they could ever earn. The assistant director's main headache was the perfect match of all the scenes, differing only in the actions of Phil. Ramis' assistants carefully monitored that all the extras behaved the same way and that the cars entered the frame at the same time. And so that the puddles were where they were supposed to be according to the script. The question is, how long did Phil live in Groundhog Day? In different versions of the script, the authors call 8, 10, and 35 years. And in the comments to the DVD edition, the director himself mentioned that initially there was an idea to loop the hero for as long as 10,000 years.
"I have been stabbed, shot, poisoned, frozen, hanged, electrocuted and burned."
But it is not the types of murders that are remarkable, but the fact that according to legend, this is how they dealt with Grigory Rasputin. Such is the case. Local residents acted as extras without much enthusiasm, but the children's half of the town willingly helped the film crew by throwing artificial snow because there was simply nowhere to get real snow. After the filming process was completed, director Harold Ramis decided to keep the main character's coat as a souvenir of the film. A scene was filmed in which Phil thoroughly destroys his room, torments pillows, paints the walls with a spray can to test his suspicions, and so to speak a complete reboot. Besides, shaves his head. The camera then pulls back from his face to show that his hair and room are back to normal the next morning. But the crew had some technical problems, and the scene was replaced with Phil instead simply breaking a pencil. The story of American comedian Paul Lynde was allegedly the inspiration for one of the film's most famous lines.
3 cheeseburgers, 2 large fries, 2 chocolate cocktails, 1 Coca-Cola and pancakes.
One night while Paul was driving while intoxicated, he crashed into a mailbox. The police officers being nearby approached the car. The actor rolled down the window and said,
"I'll take a cheeseburger. I'll take an onion and a large Sprite."
According to another version, the scene was inspired by an incident involving another comedian, Shecky Green. Being in a state of severe alcoholic intoxication, he drove his car into a huge fountain. When eyewitnesses pulled out the unfortunate driver, water from the fountain poured generously into his car. The comedian exclaimed,
"Clean your rug, and don't use hot wax."
To make the general plans of the film look the same, a huge number of different takes were filmed in different weather conditions. But in the end, Ramis chose the gloomy view of Wisconsin. The director also asked legendary radio host Steve Dahl to be the announcer for Punxsutawney Radio. But the latter did not understand the whole message of the philosophical comedy and refused. Before filming the episode where Phil hugs Ned, Murray warned Tobolowsky that he would follow the script. However, on camera, he began to act completely differently. Tobolowsky was caught off guard, but he didn't show it and played along with his partner. The scene where Phil reads to Rita as she falls asleep was invented by Bill and inspired by an incident in his life. After drinking a lot of champagne, his wife fell asleep after the wedding, and he read to her out loud until he fell asleep himself. Phil's phrases.
Let's live here.
It wasn't in the script either, but the director really liked it, and it was left in the film. In the scene where Phil throws the alarm clock on the floor, those was supposed to break from the impact, but this didn't happen, so the film crew had to smash it with a hammer. By the way, the watch was created specifically for the film. He could only display the time 5:59 and 6 o'clock, after which he began to play the song, "I Got You Baby" by the duet Sonny Cher. By the way, this song was in Danny Rubin's script from the very beginning, thanks to the chorus that repeats endlessly and perfectly suits Phil's situation. At the piano teacher's house, when Phil rather ineptly performs a rhapsody on the theme of Paganini by Sergei Rachmaninoff, we can hear Bill Murray himself playing. The actor did not know the notes, and specially studied part of the piece by ear. And here is a solo on the synthesizer during the dance for Murray performed by composer and pianist Terry Fryer, whose hands do we see in the frame. And the French poem that Phil reads to Rita is actually lyrics from the 1957 Jacques Brel song La Bourrée du Célibataire, which translates as, "The girl I will love like a fine wine gets better with every morning." Ice sculptures that Phil learned to carve were actually created by Randy Rupert, nicknamed Chainsaw Wizard. Rupert has his own store in Punxsutawney, and every Groundhog Day, he sells his wooden figures. One of the most controversial scenes about which all members of the film crew argued was the final episode, in which Phil wakes up in the same bed with Rita and realizes that he has escaped from the time loop. There were three options. In the morning, Phil and Rita could remain in the same clothes as in the evening, could have been in different clothes, which would have hinted at the closeness between them, and they could wake up completely naked. 25 takes were filmed in all versions, but opinions were divided almost equally in favor of each version. The decisive vote was the voice of a girl from the film crew, who said that new clothes or lack thereof would ruin the whole movie. When at the end of the movie Phil kisses Rita, it starts snowing, probably exactly he who symbolizes the breaking of the loop. The same thing happens at the end of the film It's a Wonderful Life, where snow means the heroes return to the real world. It's interesting that the opening scenes with Phil on a blue background were only invented during editing, so the crew had to go back to the set and capture them. Shortly after the film's release, a plaque with the words appeared in Woodstock, with the words "Bill Murray stepped here," right in the place where there was a big puddle, in which Phil constantly stepped. There is also a sign in the city that says Ned's Corner, on the corner of the building where Phil met with Ned. By the way, some Woodstock residents hoped that thanks to the filming of Groundhog Day, the city would attract tourists. However, all the glory went to the real Punxsutawney. If before the film's release about 2,000 guests would come to Groundhog Day, then subsequently several tens of thousands. And now you can see what was left behind the scenes of the film, and what kind of atmosphere reigned on the set.
Okay, yeah, I'm a boxer, see? Tyson, you're next, I want you, man. I'm gonna eat you for dinner.
Harold, ready?
Harold, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you a director or a stylist?
Okay, ready?
All right. I'd like to dedicate this take to Peter, a guy who's kept me in focus more often than he hasn't. Thanks, man. I don't bathe that much. People give me a lot of space.
I believe that.
Hey, mister. Who are you, anyway?
You don't know me? I've been playing in here every day for months.
Oh, yeah? So how come I ain't seen you?
I don't know. I seen yous.
So what's your name?
They call me Punxsutawney Phil.
Like the Groundhog?
Yeah. Like the Groundhog.
Lucky.
Yeah, I'm real lucky. You want some action?
Hey, mister. Are you some kind of hustler?
No. Gosh, no.
Groundhog Day premiere held on February 12, 1993 year. The film managed to gross almost $71 million on a budget of $14 million and $600,000, and closed the top 10 highest grossing films of the year. However, overall, collections were considered rather modest. The studio's net profit was only $32.5 million, and Bill Murray's fee was $10 million. Critics praised the movie for blending light comedic moments with a deeper philosophical narrative. Its clear but subtle moral and the excellent performances of Bill Murray, Andie MacDowell, and Stephen Tobolowsky. Danny Rubin and Harold Ramis also received letters from enthusiastic viewers of various religious backgrounds. They thanked them for the perfect illustration of their beliefs. Despite critical acclaim, major film awards largely overlooked Harold Ramis's work. Only the British Academy of Film and Television Arts honored Groundhog Day for Best Original Screenplay. The London Film Critics Circle also recognized the script, and the British Comedy Awards named it the Best Comedy Film. The Saturn Awards nominated the movie in 6 categories, with Andie MacDowell winning Best Actress. Few people know, but they were planning to film a sequel. The script for the first movie ended with Phil waking up on February 3rd, breaking out of his own loop. He feels euphoric that this day has arrived, but unfortunately Rita was not so inspired and truly happy. In my original draft I had a different ending. Phil wakes up and lies next to Rita for the first time. He says, "Yes, today is February 3rd. But Rita can't wait to get out of there. So why? Well, because she's been waking up on February 3rd for several weeks now. After the film's release, several writers claimed that the story had been stolen from their ideas, despite the fact that Danny Rubin openly stated that his only inspiration was the story of 1892, Christmas Every Day, an Interview with the Vampire, which inspired him to consider the idea of eternal life. After watching this movie, the monk saw a Christian allegory. Kabbalists analyzed the meaning of his numerology. Economists published an article arguing that the film illustrates the importance of the paradigm. Drug addicts confirmed that they were trapped in a trap of their own making. Danny Rubin later admitted to mixed feelings about the final product. While he was grateful to Harold Ramis and Columbia Pictures for believing in his material and making a great film, he felt that something was off about it. Rubin realized that succeeding in Hollywood required making compromises he wasn't ready for. The conflict between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis extended beyond the set of Groundhog Day. After the film's production wrapped, Murray completely cut off communication with Harold Ramis. Never explaining his behavior, Harold Ramis expressed deep regret about their estrangement, admitting he sometimes dreamed of them being friends again and working on a new project together. For the next 20 years, their interactions were limited to brief greetings at public events. However, in 2014, shortly before Harold Ramis's death, Brian Doyle Murray persuaded Bill to visit Harold, who was suffering from a severe autoimmune disease. It's rumored they reconciled, and Murray even wrote an obituary. which he read during the Oscar ceremony. The exact nature of their falling out remains unknown, but mutual acquaintances speculated that Murray wanted to prove he could thrive outside his collaboration with Harold. Regardless, Groundhog Day stands as a pinnacle achievement for everyone involved in its creation. While the movie wasn't the first to explore a time loop, it set the standard for the subgenre and inspired later fantastical comedies like Liar Liar, 1997, The Truman Show, 1998, and Click, 2006. Interestingly, when Groundhog Day was released, critics at the Washington Post called it decent but not exceptional, predicting it would never make it into the National Film Registry of the U.S. Library of Congress. Ironically, in 2006, the film was preserved for future generations with the traditional justification of being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.